Hello, hello, everyone. Oh, Mary's on. I like this, Mary. Oops, I need to move that over there. Put trackers over here. Ba-doom, ba-doom, ba-doom. Okay. Hey, Luke, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, good, good. And we have a couple minutes here before we start. How's everyone handling the heat?
Good, ever since I fixed my AC in my car.
That would help.
It
No,
was a
was
rough weekend. I'm still recovering. I was outside in it all weekend.
Oh, really? That's a lot.
Yeah, swim championships for my kids.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I
Yeah.
was antiquing with my daughter in Jackson. So that
Ooh,
was,
fun.
it did get hot though. That did get hot.
Yeah.
So around 1 o'clock, so we're eating lunch inside where there's AC.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, upside is we won the championship, first place.
Oh,
So
awesome. That's exciting.
it was exciting. Made it kind of worth it, except for the misery. I feel way worn out today.
I tell you, when my daughter was doing swim, those were heinous. Yeah, like you had to recover from those things. You were so hot. And not only that, it's like so many people too. So you're just like
Easily,
okay.
easily 1,000 plus people at the Wackford there in Elk Grove. It was crazy town.
That's crazy. All right, welcome, welcome. Oh, we got we got lots of new people today. Okay. Like it, like it. Amy Coleman. Okay, we're talking. We're talking. Are you guys on talking about conversations for forums here? Okay. Nice, nice, nice. Okay. Ooh, Michelle's on. Okay. Can everyone see the grid? We'll go through this and then we'll talk about conversations. Sherry, congratulations. You were on vacation. You had a new grandbaby, correct? So
Yay, healthy baby.
congratulations. So no context, 25 context. Ara, is Ara on? Ara, where's Ara? Okay. Carlos. Goal is 100 contacts, 1 closing, 1 escrow, 2 appointments, 1 open house, 35 contacts. But you got one video done, 2 appointments set, 2 appointments held, 1 buyer signed, 1 contract written. How are you doing 35 contacts and getting 2 appointments set?
What was that?
How are you getting 35 contacts and getting 2 appointments set?
There were referrals. I had some referrals come in, so there were pretty solid leads that I was able to schedule and went on also.
All right. Is David on? David. I don't see David. Turns the numbers. Turns the numbers. So Jessica. Missing anyone here? Michael's on. I saw him. Michael. Goal was 15 contacts, 1 appointment held, 9 contacts, 3 appointments set, 3 appointments held, 3 listings signed, 1 escrow. What are you doing, man? That is crazy.
Yeah, I had a new listing and got a call from somebody that wanted me to represent them on that. So had a couple of appointments from that, going over the dual agency rules and things like that and the expectation there. And then just got a buyer pre-approved, and as soon as we got the green light from the lender, just showed them a few houses and got them in contract.
Going all the way down. Good job. Luke, 30. You have a goal of 30 contacts, 2 open houses, 1 appointment set and held, and 1, 2 escrows. That's a little bit. So 35 contacts, 2 open houses, 1 video, 1 appointment set, 1 escrow. Congrats, man. Doing it. Meeting goals. I like that. If you haven't turned your numbers, because I want to talk, we have a lot of people on to talk about conversations around these things. Please turn them in. You should have the link in your email or on Circle. Please turn in your numbers. Please turn in your numbers. Please turn in your numbers. So if you're new, please go to Circle, go to the club tab, and there will be a link there to turn in your numbers. So I would love you to be part of club. We do a lot of discussion about current issues and a lot of discussion around converting and how to get leads on this call, as well as hold you accountable to your numbers. And those of you who have been on club can attest how it helps you keep on top of your business. Is that correct? Luke, Mike, anyone
Yep.
else?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so if you want a better business, show up and do this. So all right. Anyone else want to chime in?
Whenever you're ready to discuss the forums, I have.
Let's go. Everyone's here to discuss the forums. Let's do this. So I assume everyone, I want this to be a little more advanced. I assume everyone, sorry, let me, there. I assume everyone knows the forums. I want to have more conversations about the forums. Are we good?
So I haven't taken the class by Bruce, but I will take it very soon. I've seen that you guys uploaded it to YouTube, so I'm going to go through the entire thing in detail over the forum specifically. But I did have a quick question about new builds. How are we going to navigate new builds? Is it going to change? How is it going to change in regards to these?
New builds will likely not change that much. The vast majority of new build homes actually, when you actually sign up, you actually sign up as a referral agent. So you're not going to have a buyer broker ability. You're not going to have any fiduciary to your buyer in that case, generally. So on a new home, there's not going to be an issue because generally they're going to be referral agent. Now, once in a while, I'll see a small or regional builder do it on an actual contract, RPA, an RPA where you are representing the buyer on that. And that point, you will need a buyer broker agreement if they're gonna make you the buyer's agent on that transaction. Most new home builders don't do that. Most home builders set you up as a referral agent, which means you have no fiduciary, therefore no buyer broker agreement is needed. You'll probably have one even before you show the new home, but it'll become unnecessary once they're in contract, right? So does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Has everyone taken the class or town hall? Saw Bruce's class or did the town hall? I just want to make sure we're all good.
I have not done a town hall. I'm out of date on things. Like I said, I'm going to watch the Bruce.
Okay, if you haven't, because I'm not going to go over the forums because we're already on the forums. But I want to talk to you about, let's talk about conversations around the forums. So I'm getting a lot on my personal team. I'm hearing a lot of people coming at listing appointments and having things about conversations about buyer agent commissions. Are we okay? So I want to note there's 3 going in. Okay, in 2 days, July 24th, the forms are going to change. All the forms are going to, any form referencing co-op commission is going away, and the new forms will be in place. I can get you a link to the new forms, but they're also in Circle in Bruce's class as well. Here's what I want to say. So buyer broker agreements are going to happen. August 12th is when MetroList, sorry, let me go stay on date. August 12th is when MetroList is going to change their structure so that buyer agent commissions will not be displayed on their things. Two additional changes will be happening to MetroList. One, they'll have 2 optional checkboxes that will say, 1, if you no seller concession is being considered, and another checkbox says no buyer agent compensation is being considered. Now I want you to note 2 things that's going to be important. Is in this new world, we're going to distinguish between 2 things: seller concessions and buyer agent compensation. They're not the same, okay? In the MetroList, you will not be able to list buyer compensation, but you can put code words and confidential remarks that say sellers willing to consider seller concessions. And you can even put an amount. You can put 5,000 or 2.5% of seller concessions, but you can't say buyer compensation. Make sense? You can say call for information on seller concessions if you like. Okay. Now, as a buyer's agent, how it's going to be a brave new world. There are 3 different ways you can be paid as a buyer's agent. Right? 1, same as old way, even though actually no, CAR has taken the position that the future of real estate is that there is no co-op commission, that agents are not sharing commission in the future. They want a world where buyers pay the commission to the buyer's agent, seller pays the commission to the listing agent, or they work out an agreement between them. That's how they want that. So, but it's not that it's not allowed, it's not illegal. You can still do it. They just want to support a world. I think they're trying to avoid a lawsuit from DOJ, but whatever. So support a world that not happen. That doesn't mean it's not illegal. So you can still get your clients to co-op, but if you look at the new listing agreement form, there's no space for a co-op commission. There's only space for the listing agent commission. So I want you to note that if you want to still co-op, you can co-op, but CAR does not have forms. So in our resource section in Circle, Bruce and I have made a co-op form, co-op broker form that's just for our agents. So it's not for other agents, it's for us. So if your seller has agreed to co-op, or if you are on the buy side and they want to, the listing agent says, no, I got 6%, I'll share it with you, or I'm sharing my commission with you, and the listing agent is paying you, or the listing brokerage is paying you a commission, that's a co-op. We have a co-op form called the broker to broker compensation agreement. That's in Circle under resources forms. You'll need to use that form to memorialize your agreement with the listing agent on paying you commission. All right, you good? All right. Same time, you can get paid by the seller. So there's a new form that you would attach, check a box in the RPA, you would attach with the RPA, the SPBB, which says seller pay me, buyer's agent of commission. So you can request the seller to pay. So listing agent can pay you, seller can pay you. And you need to distinguish those. They're two different things. Okay, two different forms, how it goes happens. Seller can pay you. One. Third level is buyer can pay you as a buyer's agent directly, which I imagine is going to be somewhat rare, but they can. Or they can pay you with some credit. So I suspect we're going to get a little weird because I've been told that not a lot of brokerages are training this real well. So you may get people that try to give you a commission, but really give your buyer a seller credit. But that means this credit would go from the seller to the buyer's side of the settlement statement, and your commission would be on the buyer's side of the settlement, and the credit would offset it, so to speak. But if they do that, just know that's considered a seller credit, so it's subject to any lending credit seller credit limits. So that's why it's very important, if the seller is going to pay you, even if the agent's like weird and doesn't know what to do or writing some addendum or something, what you really want to do is get it on the SPBB, because that designates that money not as a credit, but as compensation. For lending standards on the buy side, if it's considered compensation, it will be subject to the seller credit limits that lenders put on buyers' loans. Are we clear? Did I make anyone unclear about that? Okay.
John, I think you should say it again.
Which part?
It's a little confusing, but I think.
Okay, so that's what I want to say. There's 3 ways you can get paid. Same way we've always done it. Agent to agent compensation, co-op. But CAR does not support that with any forms, so you have to use our co-op form. And I suspect eventually it will fade away, but in the meantime, there's going to be situations where that's still happening. You're going to have to still do that. Use our form. 2, seller pays the buyer directly, buyer's agent directly. That happens through the RPA, through negotiation, within a form attached to the RPA called the SPBB, which if you haven't taken class, you should look at that form. And it says, seller, this is my buyer's offer, and I need you to pay me as well. Okay. That's the second level. Seller pays you directly. Third level is buyer pays you directly. Either they pay you themselves or they pay with some sort of seller credit. I would not recommend doing a seller credit for compensation for you as a buyer's agent off your buyer side HUD, because it will complicate lending for your buyer. So if you have, remember, there's credit limits, depending on the type of loan, there's credit limits on loans. That how much how much the buyer can get in credit on certain loans. And if your compensation is being compensated by credit, it may hit the limit if you have other credits you need to get. I need to replace a roof, or we got pest repairs or something we need to credit. They will hit a limit. So you need to be careful of using credits on the buy side and then having the buyer pay your compensation. Does that make sense? So We clear?
Out of those two, which does the brokerage prefer us to use? Not the buyer compensation, but the other two.
Frankly, I have to say, when this first came out, Bruce and I were very upset, and we got on the phone and we were yelling at each other because we thought Carr was very arrogant about this. They're
Fair.
deciding to make a standard for an industry that is not law, which is, I guess that's their choice. But I thought they represented us, but that's okay. That's another story. That's a whole nother story. But two, we don't mind. We made the form for broker to broker co-op compensation. I will say that Carr has set the standard. I can say DOJ feels that's the standard. I think they went that way because DOJ intervened on the forms. That's the way they're delayed. And DOJ is in a lawsuit with the MLS on the East Coast. And they have come out in written opinions saying they don't believe brokers should compensate each other at all. The buyer should pay the buyer. The seller should pay the listing unit. That's how they view the world. And I think they made that clear with Carr. And so Carr was worried about a lawsuit. So they were in a brave new world. Having said that, heck, election in November could change things, right? So that's how fluid it is, right? So you have a new president, you have a different DOJ, right? So all these things can happen. There's going to be a lot of changes. On the same point, the state of California is passing a new law as well that will require buyer broker agreements for all agents in California, including commercial ones. And they are putting a buyer broker agreement in place, and that's why some of the restrictions you see on the forums, like the buyer broker agreement has a 3-month max time limit on it, is actually because it's mimicking what's going through the legislature right now. So we may see more changes and requirements that come when that law is finally finalized, and that will be implemented likely January 2025. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you're representing the buyer and you're speaking to the listing agent, is the listing agent going to say, I'll share my commission, or is it okay for, like, say I'm representing the buyer, to ask the listing agent about the commission?
Okay, this is where it's going to get confusing, and that's why I want to talk with you, because you guys need to be very clear on this. There's going to be a lot of agents who are listing that are confused. They may say, oh yeah, I got you 2.5%. Then you're going to have to say, is the seller paying the 2.5%? Or are you sharing a commission with me, your commission with me? And depending what they say, you have to use a different form. Make sense? So I suspect there's going to be a lot of commission sharing still. So you're going to have to be like, when you write the offer, you're going to have to put our personal broker to broker compensation agreement in there and put 2.5% and send it with the offer. And you're going to have to mark on there, addendum, and you put broker to broker compensation agreement on the RPA. So it ties it to the RPA and puts it in. Make sense?
So I have an example. So I have a listing right now. It's not in contract. It already has it the regular way. So let's just say it goes into contract after the 12th. That's when that form should be presented. That buyer.
Well, I suspect you're going to have to use that after 2 days from now, because the form is going to disappear anyways, right?
Okay.
So, well, I guess.
Well, it's still in MetroList.
Not technically, it'll still be in MetroList, so it won't really matter. But yeah, it won't really matter. But I would suspect that you probably would want to memorialize that on a form, because if it doesn't close by August 12th, that compensation is going to disappear.
Okay.
And then they're going to say, no, you said 2.5%. You said, no, it was 2%. And I don't think you want that argument. So I suspect even now, if you have a shared compensation on a listing, even if it gets into contract, if it's going past August 12th, I would just memorialize that in a compensation agreement, just because you want clarity if it disappears later, right? So
Got it. Thank you.
we've had these disputes. It's been crazy. And then going back to MetroList and trying to get old records is tough. So don't do it. Okay. Are we clear on the compensations? I just want to.
John,
Yeah.
if you put the in the offer, the RPA, saying I want I want the seller to cover my buyer compensation, which I have in this separate agreement with the buyer. Is there a form, or you just put that in the RPA?
There is a form. It's called the SPBB.
SPBB.
SPBB. And I don't want to go over all the forms right now, because That's a whole, Bruce did a whole hour and a half presentation, which is recorded in Circle for you guys, that goes over the forms directly. But there's a form SPVB, which would be tied to the RPA. There's a checkbox for it. You tie it in the new RPA, you put it in there. Now, let's get to a conversation standard on this. You're writing an offer. They're not offering commission. They say negotiate it. You're putting your SPB in. It is part of the offer. They can come back and say, I like your buyer's offer, but we don't want to pay your buyer's agent commission. You pay it. They could say that. So you're going to have real conversations with your buyer. So, I'm just going to note, this is where a lot of agents are projecting that the professionalism is going to come in on this, because I'm going to let you know at some point in this process, you're probably going to have to ask from a lot of loyalty from your buyer. And so that means you're going to have likely a buyer consultation where you have a deep conversation about their needs, about who they are, what they're trying to achieve, so they feel some loyalty to you. If you're trying to use just showing homes to create loyalty, and then you write an offer and they don't want to pay compensation, and your buyers, and they don't want to pay you, or they're going to pay you $500, that's up to you, but I don't know if you want that conversation. All right. So if you want to preclude from having that conversation, I would recommend that you have that conversation up front during the buyer broker agreement process, and I can talk about that. And also that you engender as much loyalty up front. So like getting professionalism with your buyers, getting face-to-face with them in a buyer consultation environment is going to be very advantageous for you when you write offers and your buyer has to stick with you in a negotiation where they like your offer, but they don't like your compensation. Are we clear? Does that make sense? So, and
basically you have
want
to
them,
make
you
sure
want
your
them to be able to counter that you're gonna want them to counter back and say no, pay it, or walk away from the house. You need to get that loyalty from your buyer if that's going to happen. That makes sense. So, and some of you have been practicing a while. You know, you haven't had to do that, but you know that kind of how fierce that conversation is going to be, and so you need to be prepared, because even if you're a good agent, that conversation will come up. I guarantee it, right? So you have to be prepared, right?
So one of the
So
good things
essentially
about
keep
that-
them from walking away and deciding to go with the listing agent is what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, but on that form, that SPBB,
Yes.
the first sentence it says in there is that you already have a buyer broker compensation agreement. So you already have in writing from your buyer something in writing that they're going to pay you a compensation. So it's not just like they can just counter it out and say, oh, gee, you don't have to pay me now, because you have in writing with them a buyer broker comp, which means they're going to pay you for what. So now, like John is saying, we're going to have to negotiate that, because it's not like they can just not pay you, right? If you have assigned buyer broker compensation, but you're going to have to, like, you guys ever had a buyer that's needed a seller credit to get their loan and the seller said no? The buyer said, well, gee, I can't take that house then because they won't give me the credit. It's the same kind of conversation. The only thing now is that that's on our shoulders, right? Because it's our commission that they're not being able to pay, instead of saying, hey, it's that bad lender. Right now it's us, and we're having to express our value with that. But the good thing,
I want to say that SPB says the buyer's agent has agreed to pay you. The buyer has agreed to pay you, the buyer's agent. So please note that. They can always say, no, you pay it, you agreed. Now, on the BRBC, which is the buyer broker agreement, there is a checkbox on the bottom that says, buyer has stated to you they don't have the necessary funds to pay you. Sufficient funds to pay your compensation. That makes sense? And they also have a checkbox that says buyer's loan type does not allow buyer agent compensation, buyers to pay buyer agent compensation. So there are still some loan types that don't allow buyer agent compensation, particularly FHA is still not their waiver yet. VA has come out conventional because the banks are basically okay with it, but FHA still has not come out with their waiver for this yet. So basically, if you have an FHA loan, the buyer commission cannot end up on the buy side of the transaction, period. It will not have
Question.
FHA underwriting standards. So
Question for you, John.
what's that?
Quick question on that note. When you say it can't appear on the buyer side, that goes back to the whole credit versus not credit thing, right?
Correct. So if it's SPVB, it's just going to show up as a payment on the seller side of the settlement statement, right? But if it's a credit and the buyer's paying you, the buyer commission is going to end up on the buy side with a credit there. It's going to be just like a seller credit, and then your buyer's commission charges the buyer.
Another question on that note. I did a transaction recently where I got a higher than the commission on the MLS, right? And the buyer ended up cutting a check to the office outside of escrow, I think, because of the fact that I think they already finished everything or something, and they gave it to us, the office, directly. Would they have to do that for an FHA loan to avoid it from appearing on the buyer's side of the settlement statement? If we're
that would be illegal because you're getting paid outside of the transaction. So, well, not that's
well, no, that's not illegal if they cut the check to the office.
Well, it is illegal because you're hiding it from the lender. So.
Oh,
the lender's getting qualified on their cash to close.
Huh?
And the lender is saying you don't have any other obligations. And so essentially you're aiding and abetting the buyer on lender fraud if you do that. So I would not recommend doing that.
Well, maybe I'm recalling how we closed that deal then, because they literally cut a $3,000 check to Keller Williams Realty and delivered it here. I don't, maybe they did mention it to the lender. I can't remember. I don't know how they did it.
Yeah, it depends on loan. Conventional, they don't care, right? But there's certain FHA still precludes the buyer side buyer paying the buyer's agent commission.
So like literally the only way an FHA buyer could buy a house is if the seller pays for the buyer's commission then.
Correct. Or it's co-op from the broker side, right? From the listing.
Sorry, so you cut out for a second. You said yeah or?
Yeah, it's either that or co-op from the broker side.
Dang, so that's a lot of buyers in our market right now then.
Oh, we suspect FHA is going to change their rules, but VA did. I don't know. I guess VA is more nimble than FHA. I'm not sure. So we'll see.
Well, if the seller if the seller counters out the bit in RPA where you're asking them to cover the buyer broker commission, that's basically they're just countering you back at a higher price. So just, like in the old days, which is still today, they're just saying, no, we want more. In order to pay your buyer's agent commission, we're not going to pay it. Fine, then just raise the offer. That's the way it was in the old days.
Your compensation is now tied to the buyer's offer. So if they counter, they can counter say, we don't, we're going to split escrow, we're going to split title, and we don't want to pay your buyer's agent. It's all the same, right?
It's just a bigger pile of money. It's the
and
same
so you can always come back with a counter that says, no, pay. I'm okay with the rest, but pay the buyer's agent. You can always.
Yeah, it's just they're just asking for a bigger pile of money. So you give them more money, and then
you can say, we'll give you a higher price and pay the buyer's agent commission, right? So
yeah,
but you're gonna have to talk that to your buyer because your buyer is gonna have to. I mean, in that scenario, even though it's a higher loan amount, it's not a big deal but you're adding, $40 to their payment every month for the next 30 years. So you need to have that conversation if they're paying a higher
conversation
price.
To me was, listen, Mr. Buyer, before all this happened, you were paying everything anyway. The whole argument, in Missouri was the seller didn't know they were paying. You know what? The seller never paid anything. The buyer paid for everything. The money came from the buyer. The seller just distributed the money. It's the exact same thing going forward, just a couple of different forms, right?
I wouldn't couch it that way, but that's
yeah, that's exactly what it is. I know Bruce
complicating the conversation.
So we'll exclude Bruce, but the rest of the lawyers would do what Shakespeare said: the bottom of the ocean.
So a lot of our buyers right now, when we do a buyer consultation with them, we are going to that section on the BR, and it's not on the new BR, it's not on the old one, but we have that conversation with them that says, hey, a lot of times the seller will pay, a lot of times the listing agent will co-op a commission with us. If in the case that neither of those things happen, are you willing to pay this buyer's agent commission? And I would say 95% say no. So just note there is a new violation term in the settlement called filtering, and you're not allowed to, as an agent, you're not allowed to filter homes based on compensation to your buyer. So if you're going to filter homes, like I don't want to pay for a home. I don't want to look at a home. They'll tell, we've had buyers say, I don't want to look at homes where I can't, they're not paying compensation.
Well, that's where that isn't, is it in the buyer broker agreement where there's the clause that they don't want to?
Yeah, so that's only in the new one. That'll happen in 2 days. So in 2 days, if you have that conversation, say no, check that box that says, I don't have sufficient funds. They may have sufficient funds, but I'm just saying for you as a protected legally, if they say they don't want to pay, I would check that box just because you don't want to be accused of filtering homes, right?
CYA.
Right, so that I got instructions from the buyer that they don't have sufficient money, so they instructed me only to show homes where we can get these things. Now, having said that, if on MetroList someone checks, we're not paying buyer agent compensation or we're not doing seller compensation, doesn't mean you can't offer that. You can still offer it despite what MetroList says, okay? So, we cool? All right, let's talk buyer consultations. So you need to talk to your buyers about compensation. Now, if in that buyer consult form, you put 2.5%, but you earn 3%, the 0.5% goes back to the seller under the new scenario. So essentially, just like a listing, you determine your commission upfront with the buyer, what you're going to earn. You can always amend that to a lower number or a higher number later, but your buyer would have to agree. So I recommend starting high and amending lower.
So, and all of this is gonna have to be listed out in concessions, probably when you close out your listings as well.
Say that again?
So when we list the concessions and things, when we close out the listing after the transactions close, or does all of this have to be broken down in there as well in the Metro list?
MetroList has not stated how they are going to change how report sold homes. I imagine we will get some change in reporting on that because I bet CAR and even DRE is going to want, I bet they're going to want reporting on data on who's doing what and how it's going to happen. I suspect you'll get, I suspect you'll see homes that don't offer any commission go for a lower price, and I think they're going to want to document that. I know CAR would, right? So over time, and they would only be able to do that with closing things.
We just don't know what that
If it says that there are seller concessions right now in there, I would, when it says, whenever you close a file on MetroList, it says seller concessions, I would write in there like, you know, 2.5% buyer agent compensation or something like that in there, right? That way, MetroList at least, it would behoove you to start recording that. And here's why. In the end, oh, it's my dog. In the end, you're going to remember, you're going to have to talk to your sellers about paying a commission. And the more data you have that shows that they get less money if they don't pay compensation is only going to help you in your argument, right? So help ourselves by reporting commissions when you close a deal into MetroList, right? So, but that's just my personal opinion. Okay. Anything about buyer compensation we good with?
What about in the case that you represent the buyer and the seller? There's a part of the form to put in there in the case that you dual agent, right?
Yeah, so the listing agreement is changing. Here, I'll try to hold on. Yes. There is sorry. Yes, if you, when you fill out the listing agreement now, the listing agreement has actually two choices and well, two ways of compensation. I recommend you fill out both of them. One is what is your, it's going to ask you what commission are you earning for selling their home. That amount is only what you're earning as a listing agent. If you want to co-op and you have convinced the seller to do a buyer agent compensation where you co-op and you're sharing your commission, you can do that, but on the new listing agreement, you'd have to put the full amount in. Make sense? And you'd have to bring in our broker compensation form without the buyer signature on there, say, I'm gonna fill this out and put 2.5 in there, and any future buyer that we put in contract is gonna sign this as well, or buyer's agents, so they know I'm paying. Make sense? The second line on there says we're going to what are you gonna pay me in addition if if the buyer is unrepresented? That means if it's a dual agency. I recommend you fill out both ahead of time with the seller. Because if you're at an open house, pause this. There is a very good argument to say that there's going to be more dual agency transactions in the future because there's buyers that are going to try to get around paying a buyer's agent by just going strictly to the listing agent. So I'm going to suspect that. So if they come to you at an open house says, we want to buy, we don't have an agent, we'll buy with you. Do I not have to pay a commission? You're going to have to, at that time, negotiate, do you want to work for free? So to alleviate that situation, I'd recommend on the listing agreement, putting a dual agency compensation in there that's an additional above what they're paying. So if I'm going to say I'm going to normally get 3%, and if it's dual agency, I'll do another 2% or 1% or whatever you want to do, or another 3%, I don't care. You put that in there. That way, if you get a dual agency situation, you can quote compensation already agreed to by the seller for that agent, so you feel comfortable getting paid if you're at a dual agent situation. You don't have to negotiate it. Are we clear?
Wait, John, why would you need to add more? If you were the dual agent, wouldn't you just give the concession that you were already offering if you're the listing agent? You wouldn't, you know what I mean? You're offering a 2%.
I can tell you on my team, if say I got 3% from the seller and they want me to represent the buyer, I'm getting compensation from the buy side or somewhere. They're paying me because the buyer's going to just.
No, I know.
Listen, yeah.
I know, but wouldn't you get that 2% that you were offering to the buyer's agent?
You wouldn't. Well, one, if you put it in the listing agreement on the second line saying, yes, additional 2%, then you would get it. You would just have to, when you write that buyer's offer, write a SPPB with 2% in there, or whatever you put in there. Make sense?
Okay.
So you know the seller already agreed to pay it if you're dual agent. So the good news is as long as you write that offer with your name on it, with an SPPB that says that amount, they're obligated to accept it because they wrote it in the listing agreement.
Well, doesn't the SPPB ask the seller to cover what you got with the BRBC? But it's not
Correct.
in the BRBC. You already got it in
and
the,
you can't
in
work
the
with
new...
any agent. So just to let you know, even if in that dual agency situation, you want to write in their open house, I want to write the offer, you're going to have to sign a BRBC first that agrees to compensation. And you're going to like, the seller's already paid me too, so I'm going to write this BRBC at 2%. We good with that? And then we're like, yes, sign. And you can even limit it just to this property, right? We're signing a buyer broker agreement just to this property if you want, right? Okay, great. Now we write the RPA with the SPPB asking the seller for 2%. Make sense?
Well, but that seems redundant. The seller already agreed to give you the 2% as a listing
Yeah,
agent.
just because the seller agreed to give it to you.
That's because it is.
What?
That's because it is kind of redundant.
That's because it
Oh,
is
well,
redundant,
no,
yeah.
actually, no, because as a listing agent, you're a listing agent, but now you're the dual agent. So yeah, that's why you have to.
Yeah, so I would document it with SPPB for the buyer's sake that the seller is
Right.
agreeing to pay the buyer's agent, me in this case.
And then also, John, you mentioned earlier, if the buyer comes in and says, I don't want to pay a commission, well, as the listing agent hosting the open house, you have the option to say, fine, I'm only working for the seller. You're not going to be represented. I will not be, right? There's some form about that. I will not be your agent. No agency relationships exist between me and you.
Yeah, I'm gonna and just to warn you as a broker, that's gonna be very dicey. Okay.
Yeah.
I've had this where they say, I'm just representing the seller, buyer, figure it out. You give them a TDS SPQ. And they're like, what does this mean? What does this question mean? I don't know this. You give them advice, you have fiduciary. And California
Right.
law, you are their agent now. Whether you say, you can sign a form that says you're not, but if you start acting like it, DRE says, I don't care what your form says, you're acting like it, you're an agent. I have yet to meet someone, it happens all the time. I see these on FSBOs all the time. They're like, I'm not representing the seller, but then I see the buyer's agent come in and they're doing a bunch of work on behalf of the seller. And I'm like, you're the listing agent too, because you're doing work on behalf of the seller. Like literally you're doing work. So if you want to not complicate your life and get a DRE complaint about something, Because the minute you give advice and it goes wrong later, and they don't feel they have your fiduciary, who do you think they're complaining to, right? Exactly. So I wouldn't recommend that for. I would recommend, say, if you want to work with me, I can be a dual agent for you. This is what dual agency means, and this is the compensation the seller's already agreed to pay it. If you're okay with me paying that paying that compensation, me to work on your behalf. That's what I would say. So,
All right.
and they would say, yeah, that's great. Great. I need to sign a buyer broker agreement. If you're just coming to work with me on this house, or if you want me to show you other houses, I can do that too. We need to talk about a buyer broker agreement now that agrees, and I will set the compensation on this particular house at the amount that seller's willing to pay me to represent you. We good? I think everyone can have that conversation, right? Okay. Jeremy included.
Clear as mud.
I think hearing these, I'm really glad we're saying the SPVB and BRBC and SPQ, and we all know, if I say SPQ, we all know what that is, right? Because we've heard it enough and we've seen it enough. So we know what SPQ is, Seller Property Questionnaire, right? RPA, we know what RPA is. It's getting used to these. That, trust me, you guys, you're gonna, and like, just gonna take another month or so. You're gonna have them down.
I swear, there's a lot of agents that don't know the acronyms of the forms. That kills me. You're gonna know the acronyms of the forms. I hate that. Know your forms. All these let your TC do all the work. You need to know your form acronyms. So SPVB. Okay, so
I have a feeling when it has to do with our money, we'll know what it means.
oh yeah, trust me, you guys will get very intimate.
I want to agree with Sherry, John. That once I see the forms and I get them printed out, it's going to make it a whole lot easier. Because you're speaking about SBP, BBB, BBQ. I mean, I need to see it. I need to have it in here.
Yeah, my problem is if I made this, there's two different classes, right? There's like the how to fill out the forms, and there's like how to talk about them, how to talk to clients about it. And I can't melt, because that turns into like a 4-hour class, so I got to separate. Right? So
no, I agree, but
Bruce is doing the forms, and I'm talking about how we talk to clients, how do we talk to people.
But once they come out on once they come out on Wednesday,
2 days from now,
this is going to make a lot more sense to all of us.
They're already on there. So if you go to car.org, and you go to, there's a town hall thing on there. You can click on it, or education, see the video on there. If you look at the description, it says, here's the sample forms. Download them right there, and they're
It's
already
so helpful. It's way helpful.
Good to know.
Put them up. I was going to put them up, but if I put them up, we end up in a form discussion, and I really try to avoid that.
But another question for you, John.
Yeah.
So I'm a buyer, and you're sitting me down, give me a buyer consultation, and you have the BRBB or whatever, the buyer representation form in front of me, and you're saying, hey, look, I work for whatever percent, and most of the time the seller is going to pay it, but in the event that they don't, then this form is stating that you'll owe me the commission. But then I'm like, hey, John, I just literally don't have the money. I'm using down payment assistance. I can't pay you 10 grand for this $500,000 house or whatever. So you check off the form or the part that says buyer does not have the funds to pay the commission. My question to you as a buyer would be, well, you're putting on the contract that I owe you this much commission, but then you're also saying on there, I don't have that money. How do I buy a house? If
I would say this, so if they say I don't want to pay you, or I don't have the money to pay, I say, great, can we have a discussion about compensation then? They'll be like, great. So what I'm hearing from you is, if you want me, I'm going to check on every home before we sell it, before we visit it and show it. So this, FYI, if you're a listing agent, you're going to get a lot more phone calls. So figure that out. So I'm changing all my phone numbers to like my office line, so they call my assistant, because I don't want those phone calls. Like compensation. But anyways, I would say this, or this is how I say it. I say, okay, Mrs. Buyer, I understand you don't want to pay me. Don't worry, there's other avenues. I might get paid by the broker directly in a co-op, or I might get paid directly by the seller. But if I get paid directly by the seller, I'm going to have to write that as part of our offer, and it's negotiated with the offer. So with that said, if the seller counters and doesn't want to pay me, that cost falls on you. I assume you don't want that situation. They're like, no. Okay. So just know, when we negotiate an offer, if they say they're open to compensation, but in the end they don't, are we willing to walk away from that house? And they're like, yeah, John, I don't want a house. And they've said to me, I don't want a house where I have to pay. I don't want that money. I don't think it's right, or whatever they want to say. I don't care. Right? Okay, great. Then I'm gonna call on compensation houses before we see it. And if they're refusing to pay any compensation, I'm gonna note it to you and you're gonna tell me that you don't want to see that house. Is that fair? And they're gonna say, yeah, okay, I'm good with that. Okay, great. So I just want to clear, you're instructing me to not show you homes where no compensation is offered. Or they're saying no where the listing agent and seller are saying no compensation is offered. Now, just so you know, it doesn't preclude you from offering. We can offer them a great offer over list price and put my commission in there. That'd be great. We can do that too. So we can always do that. And we have a lot of clients like, I don't even want to hassle with that situation. I don't want to do that situation. I want it noted where they are. Some are like, we'll negotiate it. But most are like, I didn't want that situation. I just want it defined. If they're not paying commission or not offering it, then I don't want to even look at the house. That's what most of our buyers are saying. So just be prepared for that, because that's real. On the list side, just so you know, be prepared for that. That's real. The listings that we have seen in our brokerage that have 0 agent commission offered are really suffering with lack of showings and offers. I'm just letting you know that. So it behooves you on the listing side to have a conversation about selling your home. And I would be remiss if you're doing your conversation with the sellers. I'd recommend when you're doing comps, remember, if you do comps, you should talk about the story of the homes. I would try to, if you have your area and there is a house that hasn't paid compensation or is not offering compensation, then I would show that as an example. If there was a sold that had no agent compensation, if you can find that out, because I suspect the ones I've seen within our brokerage have gone for lower pricing, significantly lower pricing. So just note that. And I tell this is how I do it. And some seller, and because you're going to sit with the seller and they're going to say, what's this lawsuit? And some of them don't even know about the lawsuit, so they're totally clueless. And they're going to say, I have to have this conversation about the lawsuit because we're going to have, there's a lawsuit that says the buyer's agent, the buyer has to pay the buyer's agent. And you pay me and we're separated. Now the buyer can also negotiate it with us and ask us for money as well. But I wanted to talk to you about that. And they're like, I don't have to pay a buyer's income. That's great. Okay, great. You think that's saving you money now, but let's talk about this. You're going to sell this home and buy in Texas, right? Okay, put your buyer hat on. You're going to buy in Texas. This law is nationwide. When you go meet your agent in Texas that I'm going to refer you to, and you go to buy your home, he's going to say the same thing to you. Do you want to pay me, or do you want me to negotiate with the seller to have it paid on your behalf? Or do you want to just look at homes? They're going to be like, I'm not paying my buyer's agent. They need to pay this. The seller needs to pay it. I was like, so you're saying the exact same thing. I don't care. And I literally say this. I don't care what the law, I care what the law says, but I don't care what they want the world to be like. We live in the real world. And the real world is, do you believe any agent do you believe a buyer there are more buyers going to look at your home, or less buyers are going to look at your home if you're not offering compensation to that buyer's agent? Where one, they're going to have to pay tens of thousands of dollars more in cash for your home than your neighbor's home that is, literally, because you decided not to try to save money there. How do you think that will happen on price? What do you think will happen with price with your house? What would you do as a buyer's agent? And what would you do as a buyer if you really loved a home and you signed an agreement that says buyer's agent, I'll pay you 2.5%, and they're not willing to pay the 2.5%? What are you going to do? And you really wanted that home. You're going to write the house higher price for 2.5% and say, give me a credit for my buyer, pay my buyer. That's what you're going to do. So in the end, you're not going to want to come out with that cash. So why do that to your home? Why do that to your home, right? Do you really want that stigma on your home? And I can tell you right now, in live conversations right now, and I've heard other agents doing that, most sellers are willing to agree to pay a commission, right? Because they don't want that ability. If you put them in human nature, say human nature, if you were an agent and you're representing a buyer and the seller said, I wouldn't pay, and you say work for free, would you do that? Now, I know we have, we're all realtors here and we have fiduciary duty and all that stuff. And I'm going to say that, but I don't know about you, but I don't know someone who's going to be willing to work for free for very long.
Well, don't survive on free for very long.
Exactly. So, and I would question the agent that is okay doing it free, right? So, so, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, can we have, and if you put it there, if you make them take their seller hat off and put their buyer hat on and put them in their buy mode, because generally people are, rarely they're not buying something else, but most of the time they're buying something else. So you can put the buyer hat on and say, look, let's talk about human nature. Let's talk about who pays what and why this system works the way it is, right? And I would say we haven't had trouble getting sellers to pay a buyer co-op commission when we have that discussion. Now, once in a while, you're going to get a buyer, I mean, a seller that's going to not want to pay a commission. They're just adamant. I don't care. Just be prepared for what I call a problem listing. You know, those listings where you know it's the price is too high, but you took it anyways, and you're just going to realize you're just going to have several fierce conversations to get the price down to get it where you need to get it in the contract and sold. For those of you who are experienced agents, you know what I'm talking about. It's going to be one of those where you're going to have to beat them up to get it there, and the market's going to have to beat them up, and it's not a pleasant conversation, and it's not a pleasant experience. So it would behoove you during the listing presentation, even if they don't agree to do that, to have a conversation about what would happen with your listing if you don't, so that when later on, when it is not happening, you can kind of say, I told you so, don't say I told you so, but it's going to make that later conversation a lot easier. So, I mean, if you can forecast the issues, right? So.
John, what do you think about that conversation you just mentioned, memorializing that in an email to the seller after they sign the listing agreement? Or you may
saying that you recommended they
yeah, recommended this. And
if you want to really tell them it, if you really want to shove it in their face, I don't mind memorializing any conversations in email if you feel that would help you later on, right? So.
All right, another question. So you use the word law. The law is this? Is it a law? Is it a settlement agreement?
There's no
it's a law. They passed the law.
No, that's what I hate about this. It's a settlement. The agents that are members of the NAR have to follow rules. It's rules.
Okay, so nobody's changed any laws yet.
That's literally it.
Not yet.
Yeah, nobody's changed any laws yet. It's just a settlement agreement.
So that's why CAR has come in and said, we don't believe there's a world where broker compensation can happen. And this is why Bruce and I got really mad, because we're like, who the frick cares how the seller pays the commission? It doesn't really matter, right? Why? They think okay, I understand why. They believe it's an antitrust violation if you do that. Because if we all start going around saying it's all 6%, it's antitrust violation. So they're trying to get a world where it's all negotiable. And that's what DOJ wants. But having said that, there's no law against broker-to-broker compensation. There's no currently. The only real law that's coming is a California law, which is going to apply to California only. That is passing the legislature right now. And if they say no broker-to-broker compensation, then that's real, right? But I have seen preliminary language for this law, and that is not in the language of the law.
So I keep hearing the word uncoupling, but the broker-to-broker, that seems coupled to me.
It is, and that's what they're trying to avoid. But then I was like, the ironic part is this situation you're creating is going to create more dual agency, which the vast majority of consumer lawsuits against brokerages, over 75% of lawsuits against brokerages happen because of dual agency. Did you know that? And dual agency situations, literally. So I'm like, you are creating a situation where dual agency is more likely to happen and fraud more likely to happen and lack of transparency more likely to happen. But that's okay. You know, let's decouple it and see what happens, right? So, but
John,
yes.
I wanted to know, for my problematic listing, like you described, where it's still in good standing, me and the seller. So, but when it comes to July, on Wednesday, and let's say that in August we get into contract, what are the actual what do I have to refresh and modify for our listing, since it's
okay. If you have a
what forms
listing or a current buyer broker agreement in place now, there is two forms: the DMBR, which is disclosure for a modification of the buyer representation, or DMLA, Those are live documents in CAR forms right now. So they're live there. We will, that is a disclosure to your seller or buyer that these changes are happening. There's no amendment or changes to your buyer broker agreement or listing agreement. It's just telling the seller, because in your listing agreement, you're gonna say, I'm gonna list this on MetroList and we're gonna put the commission and I'm gonna share it. You have to tell the seller, that's not happening anymore, right? And then you have the DMBR, which is gonna be buyer, hey buyer, I know that I told you that the buyers will just pay me, I mean, the listing agent will just pay me in broker, that's going away. I'm not gonna be able to see that anymore, so I'm gonna have to call and see what's happening, but it's gonna get fluid. They may not just pay me, right? You're gonna have to have that conversation. It's a good way to have a conversation. And I can tell you, we went out with to our sellers with that. And I had real conversations with sellers in contract. We were closing in a week on a $1.1 million listing. And we sent that to get signed. And they called me and says, John, why do we have to pay the buyer's agent if there's this lawsuit? They literally asked me that. And I literally had the conversation. I literally said, that's a great question. Let me talk to you about this. We do this because we want to encourage buyer agent to bring their buyer to our listing and see it. And you have to agree, 1.1 million is, and they listed it before and it was kind of expired listing before. So, and if we don't, it discourages agents from showing the home. And I go, your commission we offer is 2.5% on this. That's, I don't know, $30,000, $35,000. If you were the buyer on this home and you were going to buy this home, and the seller said, I'm not paying the buyer's agent commission, you pay it. And the buyer said, I got to come up with additional 35,000. What do you think they're going to do? She said, I would ask the seller to pay it. I said, exactly. So instead of that seller asking to pay us, we're going to make this easy. The reason we got list price, we got you at list price, is because we didn't have to have a harsh discussion about getting concessions on the buyer, for the buyer's agent. And she's like, that makes sense. Thank you. And sign the document. Does that make sense? So you got to have you got to put their buyer hat on, make them put their buyer hat on and act like a buyer and say, what would you do in that situation? And only the most arrogant, narcissistic buyers or sellers would say, well, it doesn't, I would say no, right? That's not real. But you'll get that.
I've never met anybody like that.
Oh, I know a few.
Can I ask
well, just so you know, 10% of the market was Open Door, all those iBuyers, right? 10% of the market's that. So just so you know, they've kind of pulled back in this market. You're going to get more listings from those people who don't want to pay a commission. They don't want to pay it, right? So we've come across people that don't want to pay it, and we've told them this is what's going to happen. And we ended up losing it because we ended up losing listing because we wanted 2% if we got the other side, and there was a broker that was willing to only do listing without any dual agency compensation on. So go ahead.
Yeah, that's working for free on the buy side.
Yeah. So and that's what I told him. I said, that's your and that's where I want you to know, as an agent, you have a choice. You can always revise down. You say you put 3% on your buyer broker agreement. You can always revise it down. I'm sure your buyer will be fine signing that. But you're going to have to understand what your worth is. Because sometimes I suspect you're going to have some negotiations where it's going to get low. Really low. And you're going to have to decide what just like you decide on your listings, now you're going to have to decide on the buy side what your services are worth. And what you're willing to work for. And this is why I think it's going to be more professional in the end, because you're going to decide that up front.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the buy side, can it be a combination? So if you do the BRBC at 3% and the sellers are offering the concession of 2%, can your buyer pay that 5.5%? Can it be a combination as long as it's not over?
It can be a combination. The buyers can always split it. So it could say, I'm getting 2% from the seller. What the buyer broker agreement says any compensation I receive from a third party will offset this amount. So say you put 2.5% and you get 2%. The buyer can come in with 0.5% as long as the lender is okay seeing the commission compensation paid on the buy side. With that, so
okay.
Have you seen any indications from the lending community that they would do that?
Only on FHA loans.
Only on FHA. Okay.
From the conventional community, the banks, because they control their own loans, I don't think they have a problem with that, right? VA has said they are waiving that requirement. VA has VA has said they are temporarily waiving that requirement. FHA has not said anything. We suspected that FHA would follow VA fairly soon after, but they have not. So if you have an FHA buyer, the compensation can't end up out on the buy side of the settlement. So it has to be paid by the seller or a co-op. It can't be paid by the buyer. Make sense?
Even though both commissions were always in the loan to begin with, up until the day after tomorrow, right? Because all the money was there.
If you ever look at the seller statement, the commission always hits, both agents' commissions hit the seller side of the statement, not the buy side. The problem is when the buyer pays you out of closed escrow and it's on the buy side of the commission, the lender doesn't care the lender has some requirements on the sell side, but they're really scrutinizing the buy side of your transaction financials. If they say compensation, it's going to hit underwriting rules. So at that point.
So if I've got an exclusive BRBC with a buyer that says it's an exclusive representation for them and they've signed it, and then my buyer chose to go through an open house and they signed another exclusive representation with the agent doing the open house.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see that playing out?
I think that's going to be the major, I think for the next year or two, that's going to be the major discrepancy. And as a brokerage or as an agent, you need to figure out what you want to fight for. So, and as a brokerage, we will fight for you, but we only fight as much as you want to fight. Does it make sense? So for your compensation. So if you want to go to task, I'm going to tell you, this is what it's going to take. This is what's going to work. So if there's a dispute on commissions right now, that goes before the association, right? But that was only when it was co-op. So if it's not a co-op commission and it's the seller paying the commission directly, then that is subject to lawsuit. You would have to go to small claims court if it's below this amount. If it's above that, you'd have to go to trial. So having said that, enforceability is a real issue with a BRBC if your buyer just goes and willy-nilly and signs another one. It's a real issue, especially if the commission amount is less than the small claim court is fairly easy to do. Anything trial court, superior court is not worth it. I mean, you're going to spend more money.
If we figure this out during the process, like they've made their offer, they've gotten accepted, you're contacting the agent, whoever the other agent is, most likely going to be the listing agent who's representing both sides. And you say, look, I have this, and you turn it into escrow. Do you have any right then to be compensated?
Unless the commissions are dictated in the escrow instructions, escrow will not acknowledge your as a party to the transaction. Right?
So what good is that the exclusiveness of the buyer exclusive representation? There's no teeth in it. There's no weight to it.
Well, there's teeth. It's just the enforceability of that teeth is very costly.
How do you find out? Like, I just had a buyer cancellation, and then the buyer cancellation also has stipulations, right? After it showed, I had checked, a 4.2 said the buyer has to send a letter, especially if it's just one-sided, right? So then, but then I just went ahead and wrote it out and said, we both agreed on canceling, but then you have to cancel within certain 3 days. If it lingers, then I get compensated. Or something rather so I'm just confused on even the cancellation or having to know whether they went with a buyer broker agreement. How do you even find that out?
The only way you'd really find that out is if their names end up on title on some house.
Okay.
Or you heard from another agent or something like that. You heard from the grapevine, right? So I'm just going to say exclusive, and this is going to be an issue that's going to have to hash out, and I suspect CAR and DRE are going to work on this because there's going to be complaints, I guarantee it, and all this stuff, right? I can tell you DRE's position currently is they don't handle commission disputes. If you submit a complaint to DRE about commission, they do not handle, they said that is not they don't have purview over that. The association only had purview over co-op commissions within MetroList or whatever MLS they were tied to the association. That is going away. No compensation will be listed. So if no compensation is listed, they don't have purview over it anymore. So it's going to be broker to broker now. So If you have that issue, it's more like me calling the other side, we have a buyer broker, and what do you want to do with it? And we're likely writing a referral agreement if we can get it. That's probably the most likely solution. The easiest solution where you get compensation, not all the compensation, but happen. After that, I'm gonna say, do you want to take this further? This is gonna require us consulting with an attorney. Do you want that? Right? So. And I just want it to be very real. Now, having said that, you don't have to explain this all to the buyer. But you should have a conversation with your buyer about exclusivity. What does that mean? So now the buyer broker BRBC says it's a non-exclusive. It defaults to non-exclusive. You have to check a box that makes it exclusive. So when you're with your buyer and you're checking that box, you need to have a conversation about exclusivity. What does that mean? That means you are agreeing for the next 3 months to work with me as your buyer's agent for any house that you want to see or do. That means if you go to another agent, legally, even if they work for you, I would get their commission because you have agreed to work with me. So that also means you can't also contract with another agent unless they're outside of the purview of this buyer broker agreement. So for example, ours is California. If you bought a house in Reno, our buyer broker would not apply to that house because it's in Nevada. It's a different state. Does it make sense? So
How long for the cancellation? Do we still get compensated for if they lag on signing the cancellation, or they don't have a buyer broker agreement? Yeah.
All right. This is why I'm going to say it behooves you to have professionalism in your business, because these issues are going to come up if you're not creating great relationships with your buyers. I'm just going to say that. And trust me, I started as an agent who was very transactional, and I did a lot of internet leads, and I used showings as my value proposition all day long. Trust me, I know I did it. And I've switched my business all the way around on that. You need to get to where you're not having that type of business. And the people that have long-term businesses in real estate, and that's where I'm gonna say, you know what the fundamental change is agents that are constantly not providing value or getting loyalty or doing the things to provide loyalty from their clients are going to have these difficult conversations all the time. And I can tell you, if you're having transactions that are having difficulty all the time like this, you're going to not want to be in the business. It's going to just be too painful, right? I don't want to fight my commission. And just so you know, there's already a world out there that has shown that, between iBuyers and FSBOs, there's, 15, 20% of the sellers out there that don't want to pay a commission, or buyers that don't feel your value, right? So you get to choose who you want to work with. So if you
Mine was a referral. He was supposed to be in my county. I ended up going 2-3 hours out of my county, so I have to send it out to someone out in that county. So he's just lagging on canceling, but at the same time, I'm showing my value to not wanting to keep going and lowballing in a different county and showing all these homes. That's too much already at that point.
Well, yeah, I mean, you need to, that's a personal.
So I let that go.
Like I said, everyone needs to make a personal choice of what they're worth, what the time is. That's what this is going to do. You're going to choose your value, right? So on that.
So John, I know you mentioned, I know we don't want to talk contracts, but you did mention one word. You said yours show California, but the options are county or city.
Correct. Your agreement is within, okay. I don't want to talk. Hold on 1 second. Let me get the phone.
You opened the can of worms. That's one reason.
Is that what it is? Okay, I just want to be clear how this happens. So. I also found out I'm losing my eyesight. I'm getting old. So, welcome to the club. I'm sure you're all listening. Right? So,
time for cheaters.
Just go to the eye doctor.
I did. I actually have what we call a myopic macular degeneration. I'm blind and myopic, but that's okay. I still won't get up. So okay, hold on.
Get a patch like a pirate.
Oh my God. I told my team, I was like, we will get so much business. If I go blind in one eye and I wear a patch, I'm the pirate realtor. I will get so much business. It'll be
Oh
crazy.
my God.
I will get so much business.
It's gonna turn it into marketing.
Oh, I would. I would straight up wear a patch just
You
to wear a
have it-
patch. I would do it. So
You have a new logo.
exactly. I'll be wearing eye. I'll be eye. I'll be saying eye all over the place. So, okay. Can everyone see the buyer broker agreement?
Mhm.
Okay. We're good. Okay. So just note beginning end. It must have a beginning end date. It can't be more than 3 months. Now, it's very confusing 3 months. And we argued with Carr about making it 90 days. But apparently the legislation that's going through this Capitol is saying 3 months. So we're sticking with 3 months. So we've been advised that if today is July 22nd, you know, August, September, October, that you put October 22nd. Make sense? So don't count out the days. Don't count days or anything like that. Just go 3 months to the day and write that same number. Okay. If you extend, you can always extend. There's now a modification in terms for the buyer representative. You can extend it, but you can only extend it for additional 3 months. So if on day 80, you're like, hey, this is expiring. We still need to find a house. You okay extending this? Or like, yeah, sure. You send them a modification of terms for the buyer representation agreement. You can't put it from day 91 to 180. You can only put it from day 80 to 170. Does that make sense? You can only extend another 3 months from the date you're doing the extension. So anytime you write in a buyer broker and extend it, you can only write it 3 months from the day that you're writing it or extending. Make sense? All right. Now here's where I talk about representation. This is non-exclusive, exclusive representation. Okay. It is automatically non-exclusive. What does non-exclusive means? You're not married. There's nothing exclusive. All it means is you have a written piece of paper that says you can do real estate activities on behalf of this person. But they don't owe you a commission unless your real estate activities result in an accepted offer that the buyer agrees to with your services. That's all it means. If you do exclusive, it means they have to work with you exclusively. Now, we talked about the teeth on that. It's not great, but I wouldn't tell them that. But I would just say, you know, if you have a problem with working or don't like my services, let's have a conversation as adults so that we can cancel the agreement if that's the case and we mutually agree to part ways. But you need to talk about exclusivity. Now, you're talking about B. B is property broker has any associate licensing working through broker on behalf of the buyer services type of resident for the properties below. I want you to note this. This section restricts the scope of your buyer broker agreement. Cool with that? If you notice, it says it defaults to single family residential, condominiums, manufactured homes. Can everyone see this? Sorry, I'm not speaking up. Manufactured homes, or if checked, single family is excluded from the agreement, and then it adds in multifamily, 5 units or more, industrial, vacant land, commercial, tenancy, common, blah, blah, blah. This section defaults you to single family condominiums or mobile homes. If your buyer is thinking about other than that, I would check more boxes. Because if they didn't check multifamily and they end up buying a duplex, if they don't have to use you and there's no exclusivity there. Make sense? So location, you see a location and additional description there. Those would restrict your scope of your agreement. So if you said, I only do Sacramento County or whatever, San Joaquin, Stanislaus County, I only do those counties, and they go buy in Merced County, they don't have to use you. Make sense? So this is kind of weird. You don't have to put anything in there. If you don't put anything in there, you just have exclusivity in California because that's where license resides.
Really?
This is really designed for the buyer if they want to restrict it them, like they won't sign it unless you restrict it, because they're also looking here and in the Bay Area and they are using a different agent and they want to restrict you, then I would put it here.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. We cool with that? Okay, so I have I have seen this where agents are scared and they put location county cities, and I've seen them put check all counties in California. So and I can say probably works. It has not been adjudicated yet, but it probably works. If you want to make it clearly that it's all of California, you can write some sort of things in there, right? So, but that's up to you as an agent. This is to you, Melissa. There is now, well, there was before, but most people didn't use a buyer program, so they don't know what was there. But there is a cancellation right notice. Non-exclusive is cancel upon receipt. Cancellation on exclusive a 30-day notice. There's also a continuation period now on the calendar days that says continuation period shall be this. So on the listing side, there's a discussion about on the listing side, it says prior to expiration of listing, if you write a day's number in there, you can say if the listing agent gives a list of potential buyers that seen the home or wrote it on from the home to the seller, up to not, whatever you write in there, 180 days after, if one of those people buy the home, the seller still owes you a commission. They're doing that on the buy side now. It says if after this buyer broker agreement ends, if you put a date in there in E3, and as long as you give the buyer a list of properties that you showed him, or her, sorry, didn't mean to be second, that they would owe you the commission, that they would owe you a commission on that, even up to the amount of days you write in there. You have to provide them a list of homes. Hard to enforce, but you're all there. That's but I'm all there to go to bat for you as far as you want to go. So this is the section G2 where it talks about buyer does not have sufficient funds to pay the broker, and buyer tends to purchase with a falling loan product which does not allow buyer to pay broker compensation to the broker. Okay. So this is where you would have that discussion. So if you're luckily, it's all one page here, all on one page. So when you do your buyer presentation, so what we're doing on our team is we are doing a very what we call 3D needs analysis. We are going beyond all your usual stuff, bedrooms, bathrooms, blah, 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 blah. We're going, why do you want to buy? What does that mean to you? What does it mean to your wife? What does it mean to your husband? What would it mean if we found the perfect house for your kids and family? How much joy would that bring you? Like, we're going really deep, asking them questions. Then we go into what we offer as a service for buyer's agent. So we're talking about things we're service, like we're going to be diligent about searching for homes for you. In this new world, we're not going to be able to see compensation as we talk, for this, and just so we explain the lawsuit and say this is happening. So here's how we're going to service you. We're going to be diligent on homes you want to see. We're going to set up the showings, but I'm also going to vet each home for the compensation they're likely to offer me to offset what you would owe me under this buyer broker agreement. They're like, okay, that's cool. And then I say, obviously, we're going to negotiate the contract, and part of that negotiation will be likely commission as well. So I'm going to fight for you to have the seller pay that. And we're going to, work through inspections and yada, yada, yada through the escrow process. We have a discussion about, and I'm changing the standard buyer broker agreement that our brokerage offers to our agents to reflect that process. We talk about the services we offer to the buyer's agent to earn our commission. And then afterwards we say, well, we also preface it. We say, hey, we're going to meet, we're going to talk about your needs. We're going to talk about the services we offer. And if we are in alignment, we're going to talk about a buyer broker agreement. But for now, we're just going to talk about this. And so afterwards, I say, if the conversation is good, I say, hey, it sounds like we're in alignment, that I believe that we believe we would be good working together. And they say, yeah, great. I'm going to bring out the buyer broker agreement right now, because as I talked to you about, the new rules require that we have a signed agreement of working together prior to doing any real estate activities. Can we talk about that now? And I'd be like, sure. And then I bring it. Questions? And then I literally go through the first page of this form and discuss those issues with them, and then we sign. We have a very high success rate of signatures of buyer broker agreements. If we do it, we've changed our buyer presentations several ways. We have found that is the best way to get signed is preface that you're at the end of this, if we're in agreement that we will sign a buyer broker agreement, and so we have a folder there, and I just kind of push it to the side as an example. And I push it to the side and I say, hey, and then we talk about them first. And we try to make that at least 20 minutes. And then we talk about the services we're going to offer in the course of them buying a home, what that looks like. And then, we also talk about, at the beginning, before we talk services, we talk values. So we start bringing in values. So we talk, like my real estate team, we have integrity, customer service, work ethic. That's what we do. And so I talk about how those are embody our team and how we represent our clients and what we do for our clients. And as I talk about the services I'm offering, you'll see how these principles line up with the services that we offer that we're trying to have for you. So we start talking about, so, when we do this, that's an example of, our work ethic is when we're diligent about finding properties and getting compensation on each and every property you see so that you're aware before you go in it. That's part of our work ethic. We're going to do that for you so you're not ever going blind into a house, right? Those sort of things, right? So we start adding value, just like we would on listing, because what are you gonna do on listing side? They're gonna be like, where do you market? What photos, how do you get it wide? All those things, you're gonna have to do that on the buy side, so show value. Question on that? And then then we ask that question for acceptance. You can do a soft close or a hard close. We do a soft close, which sounds like we're in alignment. And are you ready to look at the buyer broker agreement? That's what we ready. Questions? Aha. Thoughts? John, I don't want to do this. I just want to work listings. That's an okay response to. So. Just so you know, there's a lot of forecasting going on, economists, but most are projecting that buyer broker compensation will go down. And you can see why in this process. I think you can see between negotiation and everything, it's going to go down.
Well, I think the buyer brokers who are not worth the compensation will go down the path of another career path.
Yeah, I suspect there's going to be a purge for those agents that are have classically relied on procuring buyers by showing open houses or showing homes as their main way of procuring buyers is going to really struggle in this environment, right? And if they're not used to convincing someone to show up to a buyer consult, having that buyer consult and getting them to sign, if they don't get those skills good, they're going to suffer. Also, listing commission is projected to go up. So right now, the average buyer agent commissions hovers between 2.3 to 2.4% nationwide. Most are projecting that to go down to about 2%. That's what the forecasts are, which I am agreeing with. I think I am already seeing signs of it in our brokerage, and I suspect that's going to be the case. Listing commission is projected to actually go up. The average listing commission is 2.5 to 2.6. Most are projecting that it'll go to 2.7, 2.8, maybe 2.9. And I suspect that because of dual agency. I think dual agency would be more prominent. And so you're going to have listing brokers making more money in general.
So at the end of the day, if you're more of a listing agent, you're going to need to know this because dual agency is probably in your future.
And if you're not comfortable dual agent, I have a few agents that are not comfortable, then I'll find a trusted partner agent that you're willing to refer people to. Or if you're not up to date on dual agency, I would dust that off. There is a form, the PRBS. The possible representation of buyers and sellers. It's a form that is attached to your RPA. And it's the form that's attached to your listing agreement. So it's right in one of those forms. If you read that form, it goes into great detail about what your requirements are legally as a dual agent. And you, by presenting that when you do a listing, you're actually agreeing to the seller to do that. And it's actually pretty hard. So, because you have to have a fiduciary to both people. And how do you negotiate when you have fiduciary to both sides?
It's challenging.
Well, you got to think before you open your mouth.
Yep.
Thank you. That's number one. You got to think before you open.
You got to remember who you're talking to also.
So some dual agency conversations that I've learned over the years, and one is this, is when it comes to negotiation, I say on dual agency, I'll say this, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you and I had agreed to this list price because we looked at the comparable homes in the neighborhood and we agreed this was a fair value for your house. Do you not remember that? Right? And I said that, and they say, yeah, okay, great. This offer is less than that. Now, you may like that offer because you may want to do an offer just because you want expediency to sell, or maybe the terms are good, or other things that make it valuable to you, but that is sort of where it is. And if you want to revisit the comps, any new updates, I'm happy to do that right now. Here's the new comp sheet. We can talk about comps, and if you would want to counter offer, you can let me know based after we talk about the comps, what would you like to counter offer? Okay. Same thing on the buy side. When a buyer says, because they think they're going to do anything, they're going to get a deal, right? So I said, I can't get you a deal, but what I can do is make sure it's presented well, right? And it makes it more clean for the seller, so you have an advantage. What I say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, what should we offer? What deal can we get? I was like, by law, remember there's a law, you cannot advocate to another agent or buyer a price less than the list price on your listing. FYI, DRE views it. If it's listed at 500 and you say they'll take 480, guess what? DRE has claimed that you are violating your fiduciary duty if you do that.
Yep.
So don't do that. So what you would say is, oh, awesome, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. I'm happy to show you the comparable homes that we reviewed when we decided to list it at this price. And then after we have that discussion, you can tell me what you would like to offer. And that's a way to get around dual agency fiduciary duty without having to compromise your fiduciary duty on both sides. Make sense? But if you go to the seller and said, the buyer said they would come up to, they're at 480, but they said they would come up to 500 if they really wanted, if they really had to, you have violated your fiduciary duty to the buyer. If you go to the buyer and says, it's listed at 500, but I know they'll take 475, write it at 475, you violate your fiduciary to the seller. So FYI, be careful how you say things. That's what's said. But I would brush up on your fiduciary duties. If you want to look at it, they're on the PRDS forum that explains them quite well. And I'm happy to do a class on handling dual agency as well. So
yes, please.
Oh
I would go appreciate that class. I will tell you that.
I have two right now, so please.
I would do like a listing presentation, a presentation of offers when there's a dual agency, and also talking to a buyer when there's dual agency. We'll kind of role play that, right? So excellent. Okay. Any other questions? I know there's a lot I've thrown at you today. When talking to sellers, I would, let me bring up the listing form. Hold on one second. Oops. Can everyone see it? Did it go through? Okay. So RLA, listing period, they have now capped it at 24 months. By the way, that's new. Before there was no cap, so 24 months. And it's actually funny because there was an adjudication on a listing agreement, and there was a sell by, and the agent wrote the buyer presentation and the listing agreement at 10 years, all of California. And it ended up in a lawsuit. So,
It would be
Shocker.
It would be dumb enough to sign that.
So buyer signed 3 months, listing side 24 months now. So FYI. Listing price. And I want to know compensation. For C1, 4B here says compensation seller's broker. This is what they're paying you, the listing agent, only. If you're going to co-op, you have to put in 6%. There's nowhere else to write what you're doing. You have to use another form, our current compensation form, that says, oh, by the way, but I'm going to give 2.5 away. And then bring in our other form and show them. Does it make sense? So, but you can see it's written only for listing compensation. And then here is C2, which I recommend you check this box and you have this discussion. Additional compensation to seller's broker if buyer is unrepresented. This is dual agency. You would check this box and it says, what is percent of purchase? So it notes additional compensation. So it's additional to C1. So it's more. Now, I'm going to say, if you have this dual agency discussion, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to have a discussion when the seller, when a buyer's agent is offering an offer and they ask for the seller to pay the buyer's commission, if you already have a dual agency commission in there. Think about that. Because if you got the seller to agree to dual agency pay you 2% if you represent the buyer too, they're most likely going to be able to agree to 2% to pay a represented buyer agent. Does that make sense? So you're prefacing, I like this dual agency conversation. So please, I'd recommend in your listing presentation, when you're going to sign the listing agreement, you're doing it with the seller to get them to sign. I would have a conversation and check that box and write a number in that they're comfortable with. Now, having said this, for those of you who do your listing presentations and get them to sign, and then you DocuSign your listing presentation later, I would start advising you to fill out the listing agreement at the time of signing, at the time of presentation. Like that's how we do it on our team. I know some people have gone away and have their assistant or someone send it. I would recommend taking the listing agreement and having that conversation and sign at least this one document there so that you can have a real conversation about dual agency as a preface to conversation about compensating others. Make sense? So,
John, the PRBS is going to be attached to the new RLA.
Correct, it will. Yes.
But this.
So
C2,
yeah, if you're talking about dual
C2,
agency, you're like, let's go back to the PRBS, right, and talk about what dual agency means, right? And
Right,
literally says seller. What's
But
that?
C2 uses the word unrepresented. PRBS is representing.
Correct. So you're going to say they're unrepresented, and that means I'm going to try that. I don't have an agent to talk to. They're going to talk to me about helping them buy your home. So it's going to end up I'm going to talk to these people about being dual agent with you. And if I end up being, they're unrepresented, they don't have an agent, I'm talking about them working, they're talking about working with me to buy the home. If you're a listing agent, then this is a compensation that would result in that situation. So, yes, Danny.
So, okay, so C1, that's the total, right?
Arthur, that's the total commission as a listing agent you're going to earn.
Right. So, but wouldn't we want, Arthur? No. Wouldn't we want 6% in there? So then that way.
If you put, it is all negotiable right up there. C. All commissions negotiable.
Right. So, okay, so I have C1 at 6%, and then the dual agency, would I put 2% in C2 also?
Correct. And that means if you were dual agency, you would earn 8%.
Right. Okay.
That's what that would mean. Okay. Just because they put a dual agency commission doesn't mean they're obligated to pay a buyer's agent that's represented. Just know it's a great way to preface the conversation because obviously they see value in you compensating you for representing the buyer. They can probably see value in other agents representing the buyer, right? So you want to set that sort of precedent. Be cool?
Because out of that 6%, I can state that 2.5 is going to be cooperated. And
correct. And we have created a form which is on Circle.
Right. The
I'm putting up now.
The BBC. Got it.
Which is now I'm going to say this form is designed as an agreement between the brokers, not really the brokers. So you can see it. There is no it's basically the CBC form. There's no signature from the seller. It's only the brokers for each side because it's a shared commission, right? Does it make sense? So when you show this, and you did 6 and I'm going to do 2.5, then I would fill it out, but you're going to have to leave the buyer broker side blank and put in 2.5% there. And then you sign it and say, this will be complete. This will be filled out with the buyer's compensation on any offer I present to you. Right. And show them that I'm sharing 2.5% with the buy side when it comes to do. So that's what you're going to have to do. Cool. The seller doesn't have to sign it because it's not an agreement for this. That's what I'm saying. It's not an agreement that the seller's paying. It's an agreement that you're paying as the listing agent, right? So, but you can see how much of a pain it is not having a car forum for it. So that's why I said eventually I think it'll phase out, because if car's not supporting it, it's just more painful for agents, right? So, yeah. We cool? Okay. Oh, did I close? Okay. Listing, that's the same continuation, sell obligations, items could mean property will. I don't think there's anything else that's different, much different, other than those things. Okay. If you're gonna do a broker compensation, I recommend you say any addenda identified or incorporated in this agreement. I'll probably put there and put our form broker to broker compensation agreement, right? I would put that in there if you're gonna do a shared thing. That way it ties it to the listing agreement. Make sense? So. Any question? Oh, one other thing I want to show you. On the BRBC, it's now 5 pages. On the last page, 16, it asks you to fill out the confirmation of compensation. It asks you to fill out what the buyers agreed to pay you again. The reason for that is under the SPBB form that you submit with your RPA to asking the seller to pay you your buyer's agent commission. In that form, it is indicating to the seller that the buyer has a signed buyer representation agreement with you with a set compensation, and that compensation is the amount you're asking for is the amount of compensation in that agreement. That's what it says. Okay. The seller or listing agent and seller can, because they're asking you to pay their buyer's agent off of your buyer representation agreement, they can ask for, under the SPBB, ask for verification that that is the amount of compensation you're asking for is what the buyer has signed to agree to pay you. So that you don't have to give them all their personal information. They have made page 5 that, so it would have their compensation and the buyer's signature. Ideally, in that situation, Cara stated that you would just give them page 5 of the buyer broker agreement to show them that you have a valid buyer broker agreement signed by this. That's all.
So we start using these in 2 days, John, is that correct?
2 days.
2 days, nice.
2 days. Okay, so one thing. There is a recording link in our circle, which show from Bruce, which is an hour and a half. It goes over all the forms in detail to your heart's content. You can fall asleep on your bed watching. I would recommend you do that. There's also town hall videos with links. If you go to car forums, they're doing town halls. They have links to their town hall videos as well. Bruce is a little more detailed than his, but the town halls do a good job. They do a good job on how to really talk about using the forms. Questions. I would highly recommend, if you haven't done those, that you do those. Oh, sorry. As mentioned, please disregard, but what about the backlash from buyers where they're going to finance our pay with a higher offer? Yes, I agree, Lindsay. You're going to have an issue when you're going to say, sellers won't pay my commission, but if you increase the offer by 15,000, they'll give you a 15,000 credit. That's going to be real. That's going to be real. So, like I said, it really behooves you, agents, to have a conversation about non-compensation from sellers on listings before you get to this situation, so that you can get instructions and an agreement with your buyer prior to getting in these situations. All right. So I would even have a discussion. If we make an offer on a home and we're negotiating the commission and they come back and say, we accept your offer, but we don't want to, they counter out the commission. I hope you feel I'm worth it, that we will counter back and say no pay. Are you okay with that? And at the time of buyer broker agreement, it's kind of theoretical at that point. Generally, they say, yeah, I'm okay with it, John. I feel you're worth it, right? Okay, great. Now it's different when it comes there, but it's a good agreement to have ahead of time verbally when you have to have that conversation later, right? So, and then you're going to really find out what you think you're worth, what you really think you're worth. I can tell you that much. So every agent's going to have a come to Jesus moment about what they're really worth. So,
John,
yes.
you kind of mentioned that if they did like the seller credit up the price 12, 15,000, whatever. How do you think that's going to work with appraisals? And I mean, if homes are already at the top.
Yes. So this is ironic. Thank you, Barbara. the argument for this whole settlement and everything was that prices of homes were inflated because sellers were baking in compensating the buyer's agent. And they forecasted that when this is in place, prices will come down by 2.5% because they will no longer, sellers will no longer have to compensate the buy side. That's a good argument for the legal cost, but that's not what determines pricing. They're going to go off comps and they're going to try to get the best price they can, regardless of what they have to pay. You know that, right? So, yeah, it's real. It's real. They have to. You know, there's no good answer for that. There's no good answer for that. The answer is you're going to, you know, yeah. They put this in place. It makes it more expensive for the buyer. I recommend, and you may know their financial situation from your conversation. I would have a conversation. I know from your standpoint, even even if you have the money, I wouldn't recommend you pay it. I recommend we only look at houses that we can get compensation to cover my fee. Would you agree, Mr. and Mrs. And some of the buyers we do, if they're a first-time home buyer, oh my God, we're like, you're not paying. No, we're not looking at a house if you don't pay, right? Like that's ridiculous. Unless it's like a fantastic deal and you're willing to do it, you make the exception, not me. You'll make that exception, not me, right? And we do that. And I can tell you the buyers are all in agreement with that. So they
So it's okay to say that to them.
oh yeah, like they have a choice. Like that's why I'd say use a buyer broker agreement, get down to that section, have that conversation with them. Please, please, please. I can't beat that into it. Have a conversation with them about how you get paid. It will, trust me, make your life a lot easier when you're writing offers, right? So when I say professionalism, that means you need to change your buyer presentation, or if you're not doing buyer presentations, you need to learn to start doing buyer presentations. And you need to learn how to start getting people to buyer consultations, which is you're going to have a conversation and show a lot of what value you're going to provide with those conversations. Now, if you want to, you can say it's legal now. So legal rules now make it required before I do any activity with you as a buyer's agent. You may have heard about the lawsuit requires us to sign a buyer broker agreement. You probably don't want to sign anything unless, you know, we have to sit down and talk and work and come to agreement on that. We're the agent for you. Do you agree, Mr. Buyer and Mr. Seller? Yes, that sounds great. Great. So can we have a meeting so we can discuss that? Right. And I think, and then I'm going to be like, sure. I go, but more than just a document, I'm going to use, at this meeting, we're going to do a few things. One, we're going to refer you to a lender to get pre-approved. If you haven't got through that process by the time we meet, we can also facilitate that discussion at the meeting too with the lender. We either have them there or have them on the phone to get that process finalized up there. So we can get your pre-approval done in that timeline. We're going to go into your wants and needs, not just what you want. We're going to look at your lifestyle. What's your family lifestyle? Because I know you have our wants and needs, but we've been an agent for a while and we are good at working with buyers and we represent them well. And sometimes I can find a community, a neighborhood, a type of house that you never thought you wanted, but maybe fit your lifestyle better. We're going to have a deep discussion about your life, not just what you want, but also what your lifestyle is so that I can get a great understanding and represent you well. Right? Makes sense. Finally, we're going to talk about what services I offer, because as you know, under this new legal rules, you may have to pay me. Now, don't worry. A lot of sellers and listing agents are still paying agents. And if I get compensation from them, you don't have to pay. But we're going to have that discussion because it's very real. And that's going to be part of our discussion. And I'm going to I'm going to talk to you about services that I offer to earn that commission and how I am able to negotiate that from the seller or listing agent on your behalf. And they're like, okay, that sounds good. Okay. If we come in alignment on this meeting, at that point, then we can agree to assign a buyer broker agreement, but that's up to you. There is no obligation. But if you want to move forward with services, we must have a signed agreement with any agent, just FYI. And they're like, okay. So I have to see how I talk about that, right? To help people show up to buyer broker agreements presentations, we've had a fall off rate on that. We actually send them a questionnaire that's like a Google form, so it's kind of easy to fill out, right? We send them a questionnaire that kind of facilitates that wants and needs and lifestyle conversation, just because it shows them that we're going to have the conversation and we take it seriously. Half the time they fill it out, half the time they don't. But it's really about showing the professionalism that we have. Two, also, we send them a little synopsis. We have a little buyer, we send them the buyer presentation ahead of time that shows our services, and we highlight our services. And then obviously we set a calendar appointment with them on their calendar. It's also and send reminders, obviously. When we do that, we have found that it makes your show up rate to buyer consultations much higher. You got to show value and remind them continuously. So kind of like you do with listings. How you get a listing, you're constantly working them, giving them stuff, communicating with them to get it going, right? Same thing with buyers. All right. We've taken this a long time now. I will keep doing this conversation as we go forward because I want to make sure that you guys are all prepared. And these conversations are going to be fluid. Trust me. Scripts are going to change, things are going to happen, and we're going to try to stay on top of that. All right. So, any last minute questions before we part?
Yeah, I got one real quick.
Okay.
So thanks. On the listing agreement, like Danny B was talking about a little bit earlier. So if you get this, the seller agrees to 6%, and then you check the box for dual agency and 2% there. What if the seller is confused about why they got to pay 8%? What's the conversation like?
If you're gonna do, all right.
Maybe I'm confused.
Yeah. Well, no, it's a good question.
Okay.
If you're gonna do compensation, if you're gonna do broker to broker compensation, you got your seller to agree that.
Yes.
In this form here, right here, you're gonna put 6%. Whatever gross commission, say it's 6%. Say I'm going 6.5, 6 and 2.5. I've got the seller to agree to 6 and 2.5. Make sense? I will put 6% there. And I said, you're agreeing to share 2.5. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is compensation if I'm not paying another broker.
Okay.
But I'm going to do dual agent. That means the buyer's coming to me and they don't have an agent and they want to use me to also buy the home. And we end up in a dual agent situation. I'm going to put 2.5% in there because you agreed to pay 2.5% to other agent. Are you okay with that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? And they may say, no. Well, if you're doing it, that makes it easy for you. So can you agree to less? Okay, you can put a different compensation in there if you wanted to. Does that make sense?
What if they ask you to, if that situation arises, we want to subtract whatever we agree on for 4C from 4B?
Subtract it.
Because on 4B, you're splitting with another agent or another broker, right? And then with 4C, you're getting all of it.
Correct.
Yeah. Sorry about my phone, man.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, John, that's incorrect. You're not splitting. 4B is not splitting. 4B is all for you.
Yeah, there's three. Yeah, it's saying listing. This is what I'm getting as a listing agent, and you're telling Mr. and Seller if there's a buyer that's brought by an agent, I'm going to split my commission, my 6% this way. If there's an unrepresented buyer and they come in this way without a buyer, and I'm doing dual agency, I'm compensated this way, or I earn additional compensation this way.
So it'd be 8.5% there.
Correct.
And what if the seller goes, that's too much, so I still want to only pay you 6. I want to pay a total of six, no matter what happens. Because
then
that's
I would put 0% there.
0%.
Or I wouldn't even check the box, because what you're saying is I'm not going to get any additional compensation if there's a dual agency. Does that make sense?
I see.
Wouldn't you just do a modification then? I mean, if you're going to give them a discount, so you're not putting a 0 there, you would just do a modification.
Well, he was saying in the meantime, if I put 6 and I put a broker to broker compensation of 2.5% to that side, but because it's dual agency, that broker compensation doesn't happen because it's one broker, right? So in this case, that would go away and result in this commission in the listing agreement. So if you just say I'm going to earn the full 6%, then I would not check that box and say I'm just earning the full 6% for this listing. Make sense?
It doesn't make sense of the 6%. You, like he says, you just want to cut it down. Okay, so I'm going to represent both sides, but I want but I'm going to have 5% for both buyer. But so it does. We used to be able to do that, but it doesn't make sense to put it in the 4B, because 4B, that
I
would just
wouldn't put it
be
in,
four.
put your full commission 4B, but if you want additional compensation for dual agency in 4C. If you want to do some group dual agency compensation that reduces your 4B compensation, you would have to put that in other terms or a modification of additional terms here, right? Or in a MT to the listing.
All right, thanks. I just can envision a situation where a seller would really question that.
I think it depends on how you present.
Yep, yep.
Because we haven't had issues getting, I would say 90% of our listings are 6%, 2.5. And I would say when we have conversation with dual agency, none of our sellers have balked at us earning the whole commission of a dual agency.
So you get paid so you get paid the 6 and the 2.5 on dual agency, and you haven't had anyone bat an eye.
No. Okay, well, no. We say 6, 2.5. And we said, if this is an old listing, this is not even out yet, right? So on the old listing agreements, we said 6, 2.5. That's how we present. And when we talk about dual agency, if we are seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we talk about PRDS. In California, we're allowed to do dual agency is where we represent both the buyer and seller. Sometimes they say, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't want that. Then I say, okay, no problem. Just so you know, any buyer is going to be represented by another agent on my team. They're like, okay, that's fine. John, I just don't want you doing that. Okay, that's fine. 2, remember, sellers have the choice on that. They don't have to accept the dual agency, right? 2, and I say, but if it's dual agent, in that case, we would earn the whole commission. And they're like, okay. I have been seldom pushed back on that. Very seldom pushed back on, right? So, and I think it's about, if you have nervousness around it, or you bring it up and you talk about it like it should be questioned, you're going to get a question. Does that make sense? So.
John, I have a question.
We should probably do a listing presentation class.
Yes, we should do a listing presentation. But yeah. I'm with Michael. I'm confused on this. Okay. Compensation to seller's broker. That first line.
What Carr is trying to remember. Carr is trying to eliminate broker-to-broker compensation.
Correct.
So this form does not support broker-to-broker compensation. That's what I want you to note.
Okay.
By putting 6% in there and doing a buyer broker, we're kind of bastardizing the form. Does that make sense? We're modifying Carr's form to make it work for us because we want broker-to-broker compensation. But their form is designed not to have that. Does that make sense?
No.
So if you're going to say 6%, because I'm going to share, and here's my buyer broker compensation, and I put additional, but if it's a dual agency, I'll drop it to 5, and I'll just do 3 and 2, right? You can't write that in there because it doesn't show it. You have to do a modification of terms or write it in terms, right? So.
Or you would do our broker form that we have, right? That's encircled, okay. The broker to broker.
Yeah, so I would just say, like, that's what I'm saying. Look, this is how I would discuss it. I would say, look, we're doing 6% here. This broker is showing we're doing 2.5 to the buy, right?
Okay, let me go.
Right? And they say, yeah. Then I would say, this is for dual agency. So is it okay if I just not check this form? And if it's a dual agency and I'm represented by, you're okay with that? Yeah, I'll let you know. I just earned the whole commission 6% in that case. They're like, yeah. Then you don't need to check C2. You just get both commissions, right?
John, it was hard to hear you.
Yeah, Mohammed, can you mute yourself?
Can you mute?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi. Does that make sense?
No, we didn't hear you.
Oh, okay. So say I got a broker co-op. I got the seller to agree to broker co-op, 6 and 2.5. Now remember, this form is not designed to handle that, right?
Right.
So I would put in C1, 4B, I would put 6%. And then down here on other, see advisories, addenda, on the addenda, I would check a box and I would say, whatever the name of the broker to broker compensation agreement. Does it make sense? I would check that box and I'll put broker to broker compensation agreement. And in that agreement, I would show my Keller Williams, me, 2.5 to the buy side, but the buyer's agent and signature and signature and information is missing. And just say, This is the form that I will get signed when we have an accepted offer showing that I have given 2.5% of the 6% to the buy side. They're like, okay, great. I go, now C2 4C says, if I'm a dual agent, if there's no agent, if the buyer comes to an open house and says they want to buy a home and they don't have an agent, they want to use me, are you okay with that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, as a dual agent? What's that mean? Talk about dual agents. Okay, great. This says, do I earn additional compensation? And I'm going to say, I'm not going to check this box because under our scenario we have now with the broker to broker compensation, I would earn the full 6% if I brought the buyer as well. Are you okay with that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? Yeah, I'm okay with that. Great. If they're not okay with that, then you need to write an MT or write something in other terms, additional terms here. Make sense? I know it's confusing and I know it's complicated. The reason is the form's not designed to do that. And so you're trying to bastardize the form to make it do that. So it takes a little work to do that. Because CAR has decided not to support co-op commissions. So this is why you have to do that if you get a co-op. So if you want to make your life super easy, and John, I just don't want to deal with it, then I would have a conversation for B, put 3% or 3.5%, and I would say additional compensation if I'm dual agent, and I put 2.5%, and then I would get them, and then wait for offers to come in with, with their seller ask and say, and I would ask them, are you okay me offering as an incentive a seller commission of to potential buyers, agent a commission of 2.5%, or whatever you propose, I should guess, and have that conversation with them. Right? I would definitely have a conversation with them ahead of time if they're going to offer buyer agent compensation. So what does that mean? In your listing presentation, you definitely need to have a conversation about the NAR seller. What it means, what the new rules are, how does it apply, what does it mean? Does it mean that you can look at it? Trust me, go on high-level Google searches. Do I have to pay my buyer's agent anymore? Do sellers have to pay the buyer? Trust me, it's a high-level search, right? So they're going to
basically just put it in other terms. If they want to pay the buyer's agent, just put it in other terms. Yes. If they do want to offer compensation to the buyer's agent, can we put it just in other terms there?
In additional terms?
Yeah.
You mean through the SPVB?
In the listing, if I'm at a listing appointment and my seller wants to offer up to 2% or 2%.
Yeah, if you're going to agree, I would memorialize that in the agreement. I would put in additional terms as seller has agreed to offer to potential buyers 2.5% buyer agent compensation for their buyer's agent as part of this listing, right? I would put that in there just because that you want to get that right? So that way when you're offering it out there, when they call you or text you or email you, you have a safe statement about that, so your seller's not surprised, right? When they see it.
Yep.
Now some say, I just want to negotiate it. You're going to have that conversation, but I wouldn't recommend that. I would try to get them to agree to if you're just doing 3% up here and trying to get the 2%, 2.5% on the buy side and get them to agree to pay it from the seller, then I would try to memorialize that. But you need to have a conversation of what we're paying the buy side and why it's important, right?
Well, and I think you said that earlier. That's why we have them sign. We check that box, and then we have them sign that broker to broker, so that is memorialized.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a saying. But remember, that's if you want broker to broker compensation. Now you can make your life easy and say, you just pay me 3% or 3.5%, and you agree to pay the buyers 2.5%. I will put that in additional terms that you are agreeing to. You're allowing me to offer that as a seller concession, right? To any buyer that brings up as represented. Great. I'm going to put that in there as a note that when people call me and say, what's the compensation? I'm going to tell them the seller has agreed with the 2.5% compensation on this. Anything above that would have to be negotiated, right? So. And I recommend you put that in your offer, right?
This might be another topic, and if it is, just say pass to later. But if we do take the 6 and it goes from broker to broker, are we as the agent getting 1099 on the full 6 or just my portion?
If you are getting the full 6, are you getting 1099? Typically not, unless escrow won't comply.
Okay.
but I doubt escrow won't comply because they don't follow car rules, they follow the law, right? So
Okay. Okay, I just want to
so
make sure.
we have,
because
I've
that could-
had discussions with Monty and a few others. They're not changing their broker to broker compensation rules, so it should work
Okay.
normally for now, unless, you know, they adopt those, but they're not just changing their rules because car wants it that way, right? They're
Okay.
following the law, right? So I mean,
Okay.
escrows, so they're opening from escrow, I understand they're looking at all those things. They're preparing to have buyer commissions on the buyer side of the HUD, right? Of the
Okay.
settlements. And they're prepared to see it coming directly from the seller or coming and shared from brokerages, right? So,
Okay.
but having said that, I don't know, maybe get some ambitious escrow, I don't know, something. So I'll probably ask your escrow agent just how they're preparing. They're probably in the dark, right? So. Great question. But just so you know, there's a lot of like all this stuff you talked about. Should we be someone texted? Are we discussing? Yes, trust me. We are talking all the time with lenders. We are talking all the time with escrow. And we're talking all the time with car. We talk with car every Friday, trust me. And it's long and boring and tedious, but we talk about it. So just one other note, procuring cause. Procuring cause is still a thing in California, but it would be superseded and more valid if you had a buyer broker.
Let me know when you have a moment to go over your reporting.
Okay.
So if you want more detail on that, that means, but that case would only come in place if you have a buyer and you didn't have a buyer broker in place. In that case, I would come to you and say, first, shame on you, and then we talk about how to move forward, right? So, did I confuse you more? Or clear as mud? Okay. I'm happy for Club for now to continue to have these conversations as they evolve. I am updating the buyer presentation, the buyer presentation, the standard one we have as our brokerage, updating it to reflect how we do buyer broker presentations, just so that it's a little easier for agents to kind of like turn the page and do it, right? So reflect that, and hopefully you'll see that coming down the pike soon. You will see your forms change on the 24th. It will be quite dramatic. So please watch the videos if you haven't watched the videos. And be up to date on the forums. Don't worry, Bruce and I are already prepared for a lot of texts and emails and phone calls post July 24th. And I think Bruce has cleared his whole schedule on the 24th just for agents knowing what the heck happened, right? So
John, I have a quick question.
okay.
The town halls, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them on the car.org website. Are they just start from the beginning and go from there, or are they
No, they're
repeating?
all the town halls are all the same.
Oh,
They're just done at different times. You can watch any of them. I found the earlier ones were better than the later ones. There was different instructors at the later ones. But anyways, so
okay.
Watch it. Also, if you want, CAR is offering a free training class specifically on the buyer representation agreement and specifically on the listing agreement as it stands. Those are free. If you look at your CAR's education right there with the town halls, there's also a link there for signing up for those classes. If you're a CAR member, those are free. If you want detailed, super detailed information about your buyer broker agreement or listing agreement, that's those trainings as well. Having said that, Bruce did a presentation on those that was pretty detailed as well. That would be probably sufficient. We are always here for your questions. We're here to help. Conversations are going to be messy. You're going to have to get good at conversations on the buy side. So I will work on a listing presentation class, and we'll work on a buyer presentation class as well to facilitate, hopefully help you guys role play this a little bit and get better. So, cool. Clear as mud. I hope this was helpful today and demystifying a lot of there out there. And there's more changes to come. I apologize. This is how real estate is. If you have one thing I will note, if you don't have a goal of being more listing heavy or being a listing broker, I recommend you start making goals around that. And we will provide trainings. And actually there's a training coming up here in a couple days for a guy who Closes about 80 to 100 deals a year, and he does it all listings. All he does is listings. He's come to teach how to procure listings. So that we brought that class in for you. It's actually here live. I would recommend you start getting good at listings. And let me tell you, and this happens every year, 70 to 80% of listings come from someone knew the agent, or the seller knew the agent already and contacted them, or someone referred that agent to a friend or family member. So the first space you need to work, if you're going to want to be listing heavy, is get real about your sphere, or building a sphere, or loving your sphere, one of those three. So hopefully we will try to help you with classes on that if you don't have that tied down tight. And I'm super excited because probably in 3 months I'll have a service to do it for you. If you're that lazy as an agent, which I don't mind, that's fine. I will do it for you. Literally, we'll organize your sphere, communicate for you. And if you're really lazy, that's okay. You can pay us, and we will call your sphere for you and say, "We're Barbara's assistant. She asked if you could come to our pumpkin festival. Did you get that invite? Oh, by the way, are you thinking of buying and selling a home next year?" Right? You know, anyway. So we can do that for you too. So I'm super excited, along with the whole marketing and other things that are going to be supporting you. Video editing, it's going to be super awesome. Super excited. Okay. That's going to be done tight. I appreciate your time. Thank you. I know this is hard. You're going to have more fierce discussions. That's just the way life is going to be, but welcome to our brave new world. But if you embrace it, you don't look at the dark side, but you look at silver lining, saying the professional people are going to win, and the professional people are going to get more business, you're going to have a happy career. So the good news is, likely there's going to be less agents, but the successful agents are going to make more money. So, right? And if you want less volatility in your business, I will get more listing heavy than buyer heavy, because buyer broker compensation is likely going to be volatile for some time. It will standardize. It will get to a point where it levels out to a set amount, pretty much, but it's going to get volatile for a while. So, all right. I appreciate all you guys and your time. Thank you so much for checking in, and I will continue, and we will continue to do updates as we can. Like I said, Bruce is going to be more focused on the forums themselves, right? Filling out the forums. I'm going to be more focused on conversations around the forums with clients and with other agents. So, okay, so that's how we're going to do it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.